A girl sold candy on the street to help her father, who uses a wheelchair, but she was perplexed to see him walking towards a luxury hotel dressed in an elegant suit. The sun was starting to rise on the horizon, painting the sky with a palette of orange and pink hues. The city streets were still relatively calm, but Guadalupe was already in position. At just 14 years old, the girl had a responsibility far greater than her age suggested. She carried a basket of carefully arranged sweets ready to be sold to the hurried passers-by who would soon crowd the sidewalks. Guadalupe had large brown eyes, always attentive to the details around her. Her long black hair was tied in a simple braid, and her clothes, though worn, were always clean. She had an upright posture and a determined expression, despite the daily struggles she faced. As she adjusted the sweets in the basket, she cast a quick glance at the man in the wheelchair beside her. Enrique, her father, was a man of robust appearance, but time and adversity had left deep marks on his face. He became paraplegic after a terrible car accident that not only took his mobility, but also the life of Valentina, Guadalupe's mother. Since then, their lives had never been the same. "Dad, today I'm going to try selling more sweets in the central square. I think we'll have better luck there," said Guadalupe, trying to keep her voice cheerful. Enrique smiled, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're a brave girl, Lupe. I'm sure you'll do a great job. Just be careful and don't stray too far." Guadalupe nodded and began her daily journey, walking through the streets with the basket of sweets balanced on her arm. She was used to the indifferent and sometimes hostile looks from people. Many saw her as just another street vendor, not caring about the story behind those sweets. Along the way, she met some regular customers who always bought something. Donna Ana, an elderly lady who loved Guadalupe's brigadeiros, gave her a coin and a kind smile. "You and your father are an inspiration, my dear. Never give up," she said. Guadalupe thanked her and moved on, feeling a small spark of hope. However, this hope was often crushed by the harsh reality. The financial pressure imposed by Carmen, her grandmother, was constant. Carmen was a bitter and demanding woman who never showed compassion or support. To her, Enrique and Guadalupe were mere tools to get more money. In the late afternoon, after hours of walking and selling, Guadalupe returned to the spot where Enrique was waiting. He was exactly where she had left him, with a look of concern that never completely disappeared. "How was the day, Lupe?" he asked. "I managed to sell almost everything, Dad, but we need to think of a way to increase sales. Maybe make new kinds of sweets," she suggested, trying to stay optimistic. Enrique nodded, admiring his daughter's resilience. "Yes, maybe we can try some new recipes. You always have good ideas." As they walked back home, the thought of facing Carmen again hung over them like a dark cloud. They arrived at the modest house where they lived, and Carmen was already waiting at the door with a look of disapproval. "How much did you make today?" she asked, without even a greeting. Guadalupe handed the money to Carmen, who counted it quickly, shaking her head in disapproval. "This is not enough. You need to try harder. I'm tired of supporting lazy people." Carmen's words were as sharp as knives, but Guadalupe and Enrique were used to them. They knew it was pointless to argue. With a sigh, they entered the house, ready to face another difficult night. However, Guadalupe couldn't help but wonder if this life would ever change. As she looked at the starry sky through her bedroom window, she made a silent prayer to her mother, asking for strength to continue and hopefully a miracle that could transform their lives. The night arrived silently, bringing with it painful memories that Enrique preferred to forget. In the small room he shared with Guadalupe, he stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. Each night was a cruel reminder of the accident that had changed their lives forever. 5 years ago, Enrique had a different life. He was an active, hard-working man, married to Valentina, the woman of his dreams, and father to Guadalupe, then a 9-year-old full of energy and joy. They were a happy family, full of love and plans for the future, but all of that was destroyed in a fraction of a second. The accident happened on a rainy night. Enrique was driving home with Valentina and Guadalupe in the car. The road was slippery and visibility was almost nil. Suddenly, a car appeared in the wrong lane and Enrique couldn't swerve in time. The impact was devastating. Valentina, sitting in the passenger seat, was fatally hit. Guadalupe suffered minor injuries, but Enrique was trapped in the wreckage, with his spine severely damaged. The days following the accident were a blur of pain and despair. Enrique underwent several surgeries, but the doctors were clear he would never walk again. The shock of the news was crushing. He felt his life had ended right there. Worse still, the loss of Valentina left a void that could never be filled. "Dad, are you okay?" Guadalupe's soft voice pulled him out of his thoughts. She was standing by his bed, holding a glass of water. "I'm fine, Lupe, just thinking about some things," he replied, trying to smile. Guadalupe knew her father had difficult nights. She missed her mother too, but she knew she had to be strong for him. She sat on the edge of the bed and held Enrique's hand. "I miss her too," she said softly. "I know, my dear, I do too. But we have each other, and that's what matters," Enrique replied, squeezing her hand. The next morning, the routine repeated itself. Enrique and Guadalupe left early to sell sweets, but the weight of the past continued to follow them. As she pushed her father's wheelchair through the streets, Guadalupe couldn't help but notice the curious and sometimes judgmental looks from people. It was as if they were constantly under a microscope, observed and criticized by everyone. They arrived in the city center where the foot traffic was heavier. Enrique positioned himself at a busy corner while Guadalupe walked with the basket of sweets, trying to attract customers. The work was exhausting but necessary. They needed the money, not just to survive, but also to deal with Carmen's constant demands. Carmen had never truly accepted Enrique. Since he became wheelchair-bound, his relationship with his mother-in-law had only worsened. To her, Enrique was a burden, a nuisance. Carmen never showed compassion or support. All she did was demand more and more, as if Enrique and Guadalupe's suffering wasn't enough. During the day, as she sold sweets, Guadalupe thought of ways to improve their lives. She wanted to help her father regain his self-esteem and find a purpose again. She also dreamed of escaping Carmen's tyranny and building a better future for them. At dusk, after another day of hard work, Guadalupe and Enrique returned home. Carmen, as always, was waiting for them, eager to count the money they had earned. Guadalupe handed over the few bills and coins she had managed to make, and Carmen, dissatisfied, gave them a disapproving look. "Is this all? You need to try harder. I'm tired of carrying this dead weight," she said, referring to Enrique. Guadalupe felt the anger boil inside her, but she kept calm. She knew arguing was pointless. Instead, she took her father to their room and closed the door, trying to create a small refuge away from Carmen's bitterness. "Dad, we'll get through this. I promise," Guadalupe said, looking into Enrique's eyes. "I know we will, Lupe. I believe in you," he replied, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. The morning sun shone brightly as Guadalupe left home, ready to face another day selling sweets. As she walked through the already busy streets, she felt the weight of her responsibilities on her shoulders, but also a renewed determination. The sound of cars and the murmur of people created an urban symphony to which she was accustomed. Today, she decided to explore a new area of the city. The financial district, where executives in suits hurried by, always seemed promising to her. With a basket full of fresh sweets, she positioned herself at a strategic corner, watching the people around her attentively. That's when she saw him. In the middle of the crowd, a tall, elegant man in a perfectly tailored suit caught her attention. He had a confident posture and walked with determination. What surprised her most was his striking resemblance to her father, Enrique. Guadalupe blinked several times, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. But no, the man really did look like a younger, healthier version of her father. Curious and a bit nervous, she decided to follow him. Keeping a safe distance, Guadalupe watched as he entered a luxurious building. On the facade, a shiny gold plaque read, Hotel Fernandez. She waited for a few minutes, trying to calm her racing heart. When she finally decided to enter the hotel lobby, she was greeted by an opulent environment with crystal chandeliers and expensive leather furniture. She approached the reception desk, trying to appear confident. "Excuse me, the man who just walked in. Does he work here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The receptionist, a well-dressed woman with a friendly smile, replied, "Oh, Mr. Fernandez? Yes, he owns this hotel. Are you looking for him?" Guadalupe felt a wave of shock. Owner of the hotel? So he really was important. Unsure of what to do, she thanked the receptionist and left the hotel, her mind swirling with questions. Who was this man who looked so much like her father? In the following days, Guadalupe couldn't stop thinking about Fernando Fernandez, the mysterious man. She decided she needed to learn more about him. She began frequenting the hotel daily, discreetly observing and waiting for an opportunity to speak with him. Finally, after several days of observation, Guadalupe had the chance to approach Fernando. He was leaving the hotel when she gathered all her courage and ran towards him. "Mr. Fernandez, can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked, trying to control the anxiety in her voice. Fernando looked at her with curiosity. "Of course, young lady. How can I help you?" Guadalupe took a deep breath before continuing. I know this may seem strange, but you look a lot like my father. My father is paraplegic, and we sell sweets on the streets to survive. I was curious and wanted to know more about you." Fernando frowned, clearly intrigued. "And what is your father's name?" "Enrique," she replied, her voice low. Fernando was silent for a moment, processing the information. "Let's go somewhere quieter where we can talk better," he finally said, guiding Guadalupe to a nearby cafe. Sitting at a secluded table, Fernando began asking questions about Enrique and his life. Guadalupe told him everything: the accident, her mother's death, the difficult relationship with Carmen, and how they struggled to survive. As the story unfolded, Fernando became visibly shaken. "I need to meet your father," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I believe there is much more to this story than we can imagine." The meeting between Fernando and Enrique was scheduled for the next day at the hotel. In the meantime, Guadalupe and Enrique lived through hours of anxiety and anticipation. Fernando's presence in their lives already seemed to bring a glimmer of hope, but the mystery of their resemblance still lingered, awaiting answers. At the end of the day, as they settled in, Enrique looked at Guadalupe with a mix of worry and hope. "Lupe, this could be the chance we've been waiting for, but we need to be strong no matter what we find out." Guadalupe nodded, holding her father's hand. "We'll face this together, Dad. We're ready for whatever comes." Meanwhile, Fernando also prepared for the meeting, his heart and mind filled with questions and conflicting emotions. He knew the next step could change their lives forever. The next morning, the sun was rising on the horizon as Guadalupe and Enrique prepared for the meeting that could change their lives. Enrique, nervous, adjusted his shirt while Guadalupe tried to stay calm. "We're ready, Dad. We'll find out the truth together," said Guadalupe, firmly holding her father's hand. On their way to the Hotel Fernandez, Enrique's thoughts were racing. He never imagined he might have a twin brother, and now everything seemed surreal. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the same friendly receptionist Guadalupe had encountered days before. "Mr. Fernandez is expecting you in the main hall," the receptionist informed them with a smile. Guided by a staff member, Enrique and Guadalupe entered the luxurious hall where Fernando Fernandez was already waiting for them. Upon seeing them, Fernando immediately stood up, his face reflecting a mix of emotion and anticipation. "Enrique, Guadalupe, please have a seat," said Fernando, indicating two comfortable chairs in front of him. Enrique observed Fernando closely. The resemblance between them was undeniable, and he felt a lump in his throat as he realized he was about to uncover a mystery of his life. "Fernando, it's a pleasure to meet you. Guadalupe told me about you, and honestly, I'm eager to understand what's going on," said Enrique, trying to keep his voice steady. Fernando nodded, visibly emotional. "Enrique, the story I'm about to tell has always been a mystery in my life. Since I was a child, my biological mother told me that I had a twin brother who was separated from me at birth. She never knew exactly what happened, only that you were taken away." Guadalupe, wide-eyed, listened intently. Fernando continued, "My mother always mentioned that on the day of the birth, there was a lot of confusion. She was alone and vulnerable, and when she woke up, they told her that her other child had not survived, but she never believed that, and always told me I had a lost twin brother. In recent years, I've dedicated myself to finding you. All the clues led me here, and seeing the resemblance between us, I had no doubt you are the brother I've been searching for my whole life." Enrique took a deep breath, absorbing every word. "This is incredible. I never imagined I had a brother, let alone a twin. My life has always been a mystery since my mother, Carmen, told me I was adopted. She never mentioned anything about a brother." Fernando nodded, understanding Enrique's confusion. "I can imagine how difficult it must have been for you, but I'm here now, and I want to understand all of this. We need to confirm our suspicions with a DNA test, but regardless of the result, I feel we have a deep connection." Enrique agreed. "Yes, we need to do this. I feel like we're finally close to discovering the truth." The hall was silent as the three absorbed the magnitude of the moment. For Enrique, it was as if a new hope was being born. For Guadalupe, the possibility of having an uncle was exciting and somewhat overwhelming. "Then let's do it," said Enrique finally, his voice firm. "Let's do the DNA test and find out the truth once and for all." Fernando smiled, relieved. "I agree. I've already arranged for us to do the test as soon as possible. Let's face this journey together and see where it takes us." Guadalupe watched the two men, feeling a mix of joy and nervousness. She knew they were about to embark on an adventure that would change their lives forever. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the future might be bright. As they said their goodbyes, Fernando promised to keep in constant contact and arranged for the DNA test to be done the next day. Enrique and Guadalupe returned home, anxious and hopeful, with the feeling that something big was about to happen. The morning sun illuminated the streets as Enrique and Guadalupe left home with their baskets of sweets, as they did every day. Carmen watched from the window, keeping her severe gaze on them. Enrique and Guadalupe exchanged a knowing look, aware of the secret mission they were about to undertake. "Let's go, Dad. Today is an important day," said Guadalupe, trying to sound as natural as possible. "Yes, my dear, we're going to sell a lot of sweets today," Enrique replied, keeping his voice calm. As soon as they were away from the house, they walked toward the meeting point arranged with Fernando. It didn't take long for Fernando's elegant car to pull up beside them. Fernando quickly got out and opened the car door. "Enrique, Guadalupe, please get in. We're going to the lab," he said, with a welcoming smile. Guadalupe got into the car, followed by Enrique, who carefully positioned his wheelchair. During the drive, Fernando explained the importance of secrecy. "We can't let Carmen know anything about this yet. We need to be sure before saying anything." Enrique nodded. "I understand, Fernando. We won't say a word to her. They arrived at the laboratory in a few minutes. It was a modern building with a shiny glass facade. Fernando helped Enrique out of the car, and together they entered the building. The environment was quiet and professional, with attentive staff who quickly led them to the collection room. The test was done efficiently and without complications. Fernando, Enrique, and Guadalupe provided their DNA samples, while one of the technicians explained that the results would take a few days to be ready. "We'll have to wait a bit, but it's the necessary time to be sure," said the technician, smiling. After the test, Fernando suggested they go to a nearby cafe to talk a little. On the way, Fernando made a practical decision. "Guadalupe, to avoid suspicion, I'll buy all your sweets today. That way, Carmen won't suspect anything." Guadalupe smiled, relieved. "Thank you, Uncle Fernando. That will help a lot." At the cafe, they sat at a quiet table and enjoyed each other's company. Fernando asked about their lives, wanting to know more about their routines and challenges. Enrique shared stories about Guadalupe and the difficult times they faced after the accident. "You are incredibly strong," said Fernando, admiring them. "I'm happy to have finally found you, and I hope that soon we can confirm our connection." Time passed quickly, and soon it was time to return home. Fernando said goodbye with a warm hug and promises to stay in constant contact. Enrique and Guadalupe returned, keeping up the appearance of a normal day of sales. When they arrived, Carmen was waiting at the door as usual. "How was today? Did you manage to sell a lot?" she asked, looking suspicious. "Yes, we managed to sell everything, thanks to a generous customer," replied Guadalupe with a convincing smile. Carmen seemed satisfied but still suspicious. Enrique and Guadalupe entered the house, relieved that they had managed to keep the secret. Now all they could do was wait for the DNA test results and prepare for the revelation that would change their lives forever. The days of waiting had finally come to an end. Enrique and Guadalupe were anxious and nervous as they prepared to meet Fernando at the Hotel Fernandez. The walk to the meeting point felt longer than usual, each step carrying the weight of their anticipation. They arrived at the hotel and were greeted by the receptionist, who led them to a private room where Fernando was waiting. Upon entering, they saw Fernando sitting at a table with an envelope in his hands. His eyes shone with a mixture of hope and emotion. "Enrique, Guadalupe, please sit down," said Fernando, his voice slightly trembling. Enrique and Guadalupe sat down, exchanging nervous glances. Fernando took a deep breath before starting to speak. "This is the moment we've been waiting for. Here are the DNA test results," said Fernando, holding up the envelope. He broke the seal and carefully took out the papers inside. His eyes quickly scanned the lines of the report before filling with tears. Fernando looked at Enrique with an expression that mixed relief and deep joy. "Enrique, the results confirm what we already felt. We are brothers. I have finally found you, my brother," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Enrique was still for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of Fernando's words. Then tears began to roll down his face as he reached out his arms. Fernando approached and hugged him tightly, tears streaming from his eyes as well. "I finally found you, Enrique," repeated Fernando, his voice full of emotion. Guadalupe watched the scene with tears in her eyes, feeling a profound relief and happiness for her father. She joined the hug, enveloping the two men, feeling part of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. The moment was one of pure joy and relief, the confirmation of a bond that had transcended years of separation and adversity. For Enrique, it was as if a lost part of his life had been restored. For Fernando, it was the fulfillment of a dream he had carried since childhood. As they hugged, the world around them seemed to disappear. The hotel room filled with silent emotions of newly discovered fraternal love and promises of a shared future. After a few minutes, they separated from the hug, wiping away their tears and laughing nervously. "We have so much to talk about and so much to catch up on," said Fernando, smiling. "Yes, we do," agreed Enrique, feeling a new energy and hope pulsing in his heart. Guadalupe, with a wide smile on her face, added, "Now we are truly a family." The days following the revelation were filled with emotion and preparation. Enrique and Fernando spent a lot of time together, sharing stories and rebuilding the family ties that had been brutally severed. However, both knew that there was a pending issue that needed to be resolved. Carmen, the truth about their separation, needed to be confronted. On the morning scheduled for the confrontation, Enrique and Fernando gathered with Guadalupe in the small house where she and Enrique lived with Carmen. Fernando was visibly tense, while Enrique tried to remain calm to handle the situation as best as possible. "Are we ready for this?" asked Fernando, looking at Enrique and Guadalupe. "We have to be," replied Enrique firmly. "We need answers." Guadalupe nodded, holding her father's hand. "We'll do this together." When they entered the house, they found Carmen sitting in the living room, knitting as if nothing was out of the ordinary. She looked up as she saw Fernando enter, followed by Enrique and Guadalupe. Her expression quickly turned into a mask of distrust. "What's going on here?" asked Carmen harshly. Enrique took a deep breath. "Carmen, we need to talk about something very serious. This is Fernando Fernandez, my twin brother. We've discovered the truth about our separation." Carmen stood up abruptly, dropping her knitting. "What are you talking about, Enrique? I don't know anything about that." Fernando stepped forward. "We know we were separated at birth, Carmen, and we want to know why." Carmen looked at the three of them with a look of disdain before finally speaking. "You want the truth? Fine. I wanted to be a mother, but I couldn't get pregnant. When I found out a woman was having twins, I saw the perfect opportunity. I took Enrique and raised him as my son." Enrique felt a chill down his spine upon hearing Carmen's words. "You separated us because you wanted to be a mother, without thinking about the consequences, the pain it would cause." Carmen shrugged without remorse. "I did what I had to do, and after the accident, you became a burden, Enrique. I never wanted you to know about Fernando because I thought it wouldn't make a difference, but here we are." Guadalupe, with tears in her eyes, approached Carmen. "You have no idea how much you hurt us. We could have had a different life, a complete family." Carmen looked at Guadalupe, impassive. "Life is tough, girl. Enrique knew that. I did what I thought was right for me." Fernando, filled with indignation, intervened. "Your selfishness destroyed our lives, but that ends today. You no longer have power over us." Carmen crossed her arms defiantly. "And what are you going to do? Report me? Good luck with that." Enrique took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "We are going to move on, Carmen. Without you." With those words, they left the house, leaving Carmen alone with her bitterness. Enrique, Fernando, and Guadalupe felt a weight lifted off their shoulders. The past had been confronted, and now they could begin to heal the wounds. "Thank you for being by my side," said Enrique, hugging Fernando and Guadalupe. "Now we can truly start a new life." "Yes, we can," replied Fernando, determined, "and we will do it together." Guadalupe smiled, feeling a new hope blossom. "We are a family, and nothing will separate us again." After the confrontation with Carmen, Fernando, Enrique, and Guadalupe knew that something more needed to be done. The injustice committed by Carmen could not go unpunished. Fernando, still outraged, decided it was time to seek legal justice. The next day, Fernando took Enrique and Guadalupe to a renowned law firm. They were received by an experienced lawyer, Dr. Ramirez, who listened attentively as Fernando recounted the entire story, from the separation of the twins to the recent confrontation with Carmen. "This is a severe violation of human rights and the dignity of your family," said Dr. Ramirez after hearing the story. "Carmen needs to be held accountable for her actions. We can file a lawsuit against her, and based on the evidence and testimonies, I believe we have a strong case." Enrique, though reluctant, knew this was necessary. "She has caused a lot of pain to all of us. If this is what we need to do to ensure she doesn't hurt anyone else, then I agree." Fernando nodded. "Let's proceed. We want justice." In the days that followed, the lawsuit was initiated. Carmen was formally charged and an arrest warrant was issued. When the police arrived at Enrique and Guadalupe's house, Carmen was completely unprepared. "This is outrageous. You can't do this to me," Carmen screamed as the officers handcuffed her. Enrique, with a firm expression, looked directly at Carmen. "You caused so much suffering, Carmen. This cannot be ignored." With tears in her eyes, Carmen finally showed a glimpse of remorse. "I just wanted to be a mother, Enrique. I made a terrible mistake. Please forgive me." Enrique felt a wave of conflicting emotions, but knew he needed to be strong. "You made choices that destroyed lives. I hope one day you truly understand what you did." As Carmen was taken away by the police, Fernando placed his hand on Enrique's shoulder. "You did the right thing, brother. She needs to face the consequences of her actions." Guadalupe, watching the scene, felt a mix of relief and sadness. "Maybe now we can really start to heal." Fernando looked at both of them with determination. "Yes, and we'll do it together. We'll overcome this as a family." The days that followed were ones of reflection and rebuilding. Enrique and Guadalupe, with Fernando's support, began planning a different future, away from the shadows of the past. Justice had finally been served, and although the pain would never completely disappear, there was new hope. That night, sitting in the living room of Fernando's hotel, Enrique, Fernando, and Guadalupe shared a moment of peace and unity. It was the beginning of a new era for them, an era of truth, justice, and above all, love. With Carmen's imprisonment, a new chapter in the lives of Enrique and Guadalupe began. Although still shaken by recent events, there was a palpable sense of relief and hope in the air. Fernando, determined to help his newly discovered family, was ready to offer all the support they needed. One sunny morning, Fernando took Enrique and Guadalupe to one of his most prestigious hotels. It was a majestic building with elegant and modern architecture. Fernando stopped in front of the hotel and turned to Enrique with a smile. "Enrique, I want you to have a new opportunity. This hotel will be yours to manage and eventually own. I want you to rebuild your life here with all the support you need," said Fernando. Enrique was stunned. "Fernando, this is much more than I could have imagined. I don't know how to thank you." Fernando placed his hand on his brother's shoulder. "You don't need to thank me. We are brothers, and brothers help each other. I want you and Guadalupe to have a better life, and this is just the beginning." Guadalupe, her eyes shining with joy, looked at the impressive building. "Dad, this is amazing. We can truly start over." Fernando then led Enrique and Guadalupe through the hotel, introducing them to the staff and showing them every detail of the hotel's operations. Enrique, who had always been a hard-working man, quickly began to absorb all the information, feeling a new spark of purpose and determination ignite within him. The following days were filled with intense learning for Enrique. He dedicated himself wholeheartedly to understanding all the nuances of hotel management, from administration to customer service. With Fernando's guidance and the support of a dedicated team, Enrique began to feel increasingly confident in his new role. Meanwhile, the relationship between the brothers grew stronger. Fernando and Enrique spent hours talking, sharing stories of their lives and dreams for the future. Each day was a new discovery, a new piece of the puzzle that completed the story of their separated lives. Guadalupe also found her place in the hotel. With her cheerful spirit and willingness to help, she began assisting in the service areas, quickly becoming beloved by everyone. It was as if she and Enrique had finally found a home, a place where they could grow and thrive. One quiet afternoon, as Enrique watched the activity in the hotel lobby, Fernando approached and sat beside him. "How are you feeling, brother?" asked Fernando with a warm smile. Enrique looked around, absorbing the vibrant atmosphere of the hotel. "I feel alive again. This place has given me new hope, a new chance, and it's all thanks to you." Fernando shook his head. "You always had that strength inside you, Enrique. I just gave you an opportunity to show it. I'm proud of you." Enrique smiled, feeling a comforting warmth in his chest. "Thank you, Fernando. Let's build something great here, together." As the sun set, bathing the city in a golden light, Enrique, Fernando, and Guadalupe gathered on the hotel terrace, contemplating the horizon. It was the beginning of a new era, an era of new beginnings and infinite possibilities. They knew there were still challenges to be faced, but with the strength of family and the determination that united them, they were ready for whatever the future held. Moving day finally arrived. Enrique and Guadalupe, with Fernando's help, were ready to leave the modest house where they had endured so many hardships and move into Fernando's grand mansion. As they packed their few possessions, excitement mixed with nostalgia and ghosts of the past. Fernando's mansion was a true palace, situated in an upscale neighborhood, surrounded by lush gardens and ancient trees. Upon arrival, Enrique and Guadalupe were greeted by friendly staff who helped carry their boxes inside. "Welcome to your new home," said Fernando with a warm smile. "I hope you feel comfortable here." Guadalupe, amazed by the grandeur of the place, ran through the wide, elegant hallways, exploring every corner. "This is incredible, Dad. Look at this place," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. Enrique smiled, but his expression was more contemplative. "It truly is a dream, Fernando. But at the same time, it feels so distant from our past reality." Fernando placed a hand on Enrique's shoulder. "I understand, brother. Adjusting can be difficult, but I'm here to help with anything you need. This is a new beginning for all of us." In the first few days, Enrique and Guadalupe dedicated themselves to getting to know their new home. The mansion was immense, with numerous rooms, elegantly decorated living areas, a gourmet kitchen, a library filled with rare books, and a spectacular garden with a pool. It was a true paradise, but adjusting wasn't easy. Enrique, accustomed to simplicity and daily struggle, felt out of place amidst so much luxury. Each expensive object and sophisticated detail reminded him of a life he never had. Despite the comfort, there were moments when he felt suffocated by memories of the past and the responsibility of adapting to a new reality. Guadalupe, though enchanted with the new house, also faced challenges. The private school Fernando enrolled her in was unlike anything she had known. Her classmates, accustomed to luxury and ease, often didn't understand Guadalupe's life story. She missed the simplicity of her old life and the friends she left behind. One night, as he pushed his wheelchair alone through the mansion's gardens, Enrique found Guadalupe sitting on a bench, thoughtfully gazing at the stars. "Is everything okay, my dear?" he asked, sitting next to her. Guadalupe sighed. "I love this new house, Dad, but sometimes I feel so out of place. Everything here is so different." Enrique hugged his daughter, deeply understanding her feelings. "I feel the same way, Lupe, but remember, we're in this together, and we have Fernando by our side. He gave us an incredible opportunity, and we need to do our best to adapt." Guadalupe nodded, feeling a bit comforted. "You're right. We'll get through this together." As weeks passed, life in the mansion began to feel more familiar. Enrique became more involved in managing the hotel, finding new purpose in his work. Fernando was always present, offering support and guidance. Guadalupe, in turn, began making new friends at school and excelling academically. Despite the challenges of adjusting, the new life in the mansion also brought moments of joy and unity. Evenings were filled with conversations around the dinner table, shared laughter, and plans for the future. One day, while walking through the garden with Fernando, Enrique stopped and looked around, taking in the beauty of the place. "Fernando, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for us," said Enrique sincerely. Fernando smiled. "You don't need to thank me, Enrique. We're a family, and that's what matters. I'm happy to share my life with you." Enrique felt a wave of gratitude and hope. Yes, we are a family, and with that, we can face anything. The days of adapting to the new life were filled with many challenges, but also with the promise of new opportunities. One of these promises was about to be fulfilled in a way Enrique never imagined. Fernando had organized a meeting that would change their lives forever. On a quiet morning, while they were having breakfast in the mansion's spacious kitchen, Fernando entered the room with an enigmatic smile on his face. "Enrique, Guadalupe, I have a surprise for you today. I want you to come with me. Someone very special is waiting to meet you," said Fernando, his voice full of anticipation. Enrique and Guadalupe exchanged curious glances, but followed Fernando without question. They got into the car and drove for a while until they arrived at a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood. Fernando parked and looked at Enrique with a sparkle in his eyes. "Enrique, it's time for you to meet our biological mother, Maria," said Fernando softly. Enrique's heart raced. He never imagined this day would come. They got out of the car and walked to the door of the house. Fernando rang the doorbell, and within seconds the door opened to reveal a woman with a warm and gentle appearance, her eyes filled with tears at the sight of Enrique. "Enrique, my son," Maria whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Enrique, with tears in his eyes, hugged her tightly. "Mom, it's so good to finally meet you." Maria caressed Enrique's face, tears streaming freely. "I always knew that one day we would meet again. I missed you every day." Guadalupe, moved, watched the scene with a smile. Fernando joined the hug, completing the family reunion moment. They sat in Maria's cozy living room, where she began to tell her story. "When I had you, I was alone and vulnerable. At the hospital, they told me one of you hadn't survived. I was devastated, but deep down, I always knew it wasn't true. I knew my other son was alive somewhere." Maria explained how years later she discovered that Carmen had taken Enrique. "I searched for you, Enrique. I did everything to find you, but it seemed impossible. But the hope of finding you never disappeared." Enrique held his mother's hand, feeling a deep connection. "Mom, we've had difficult lives, but we're together now. That's what matters." Fernando nodded. "We will make up for lost time as a true family." The following days were dedicated to strengthening these new bonds. Enrique, Maria, and Fernando spent hours together, sharing stories, laughing and crying. Guadalupe also grew close to Maria, finding in her a loving maternal figure she had lost so early. On a sunny afternoon, everyone gathered in Fernando's mansion garden. They were surrounded by flowers and trees, with the soft sound of birds in the background. "This is the beginning of something new," said Maria, looking at her sons and Guadalupe. "A new chance for all of us." Enrique smiled, feeling an inner peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Yes, Mom, we are a family again, and we will cherish every moment." Fernando, with a determined look, added, "It doesn't matter how much time we lost. What matters is that we're together now." Guadalupe, holding Enrique and Maria's hands, felt a deep sense of belonging. We have a bright future ahead, together as a family. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over them, Enrique, Maria, Fernando, and Guadalupe knew they were starting a new chapter in their lives, a chapter full of love, reconciliation, and hope. The journey had been hard, but finally, they were where they always belonged, together. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you